the bridge. No, that's
We're going to try and record how it was done when there was actually a flax mill operating commercially,
right.
and my father's passed on to me and one of my other trustees who might be along shortly. He actually worked here when he left school in 1971, I think it was, a long time ago. So we think there was 700 flax mills in New Zealand. This was a big industry.
700 flax.
700. The flax fibre you're going to see was New Zealand's biggest export in the 1890s. It was a really big industry. Flax was everywhere. Harakiki was everywhere. And yeah, we're the last remaining mill that still works on a site and has all the machinery, and we sort of think that's our job, is to preserve all the machines and the systems of working and all the skills. But our sideline is we'd love to see someone else make use of this plant, because it's a pretty unique plant. Righto, I'm going to run the DVD for you now. It'll take me a moment to get it going. And luckily he got this working again after it had been derelict for a long period. Now I'm just going to turn on my projector, and it does make a big bang noise as it has an interference with the sound system, but it'll be right. That's it. Now I'm trying to crackle because everyone is right, including me. And then once that start comes on here, I'll run the DVD. So in this DVD, the very first shot you're going to see is of my great-grandfather, who came here and took up the lease on the property to mill for flax in about 1911. So we know this photograph you're going to see is pre First World War. Yeah. And then most of the DVD is spoken by my father. In a minute. Here it comes. That's great granddad there.
My name is Desmond Templeton, and I'm a third generation flax miller in this property. My grandfather took over the lease of the property in 1911. My father milled all his years. He was the youngest of 5 boys and took over the running of the property in 1924. And I came home from school in 1947, and I probably struck the profitable years of flax milling. And in 1972 it became uneconomic to produce the fibre for the prices we were getting, and all the flax mills in New Zealand closed at that stage. The first stage of flax milling, of course, was cutting the flax, and it was quite a skilled operation. People of flax cutters were people who could work independently on their own without someone looking over their shoulder. And we had many good, very, very good flax cutters. 2 in particular could cut up to 3 tons a day. And they were top men, and they were top earners in the industry, and of course they deserved to be. They got paid by weight of the flax they cut, and to cut 3 tons a day, they were cut and tied 75 bundles each for a day. And often that was in a very short day because there were often wet mornings. The weather played a big part in the availability of flax for the mill.
Actual stripping machine. We'll get a good look at that, and then I'll run it. I'll give you the headphone, earmuffs and things. So that's the knife, hook knife used to cut the flax. You pull this knife, you really don't have to use your wrist like you would a normal straight knife. Very ergonomically efficient, and they cut every blade on an angle like that. If you look, you can just see the little fibres. You see the little fibres in the end?
Yeah.
So they're running from there all the way to the top, which allows this crazy plant to be so upright. It's a giant grass really, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's just can grow, particularly this one we've got is the grey-green coastal flax.
Nice.
We've had, this is quite short flax, we've had some flax touching that height of those rafters there. Used a very hard steel so that the flax cutter, he worked 8 hours a day cutting flax to keep that sharp. The steel they chose was really so hard it was virtually brittle. This one was cut out of an old circular saw blade. You want a really hard steel to hold its edge. And flax of course grows in a fan just like that. And it has the oldest grandparents out the end, and the parents and the children come up the very centre. And this year you can see, driving around, you'll see the seed stalks up, the karari, and so they put the seed stalk goes up the centre as well. And just like a grass, once it goes to seed, then over the next year all those leaves die off. It puts all its energy into seeding, and then the next year it'll regrow from the root. And the flax has got a root about that size, like a great big sort of weird sausage, and that's where it stores its energy. And when even the married people, or when my father sold flax plants, you always made sure it was the root that was the important part that you sold, and each frond of flax, each fan of flax has one root. You break that up and you plant that, and you get very, very strong success. It's the one plant, native plant, that will cope with all our introduced grasses, the cocksfoots and all those very tall grasses, and it'll come through and it'll, we sort of get probably 98% survival of flax plants, even in a dry year, so it's pretty incredible. Over to the machine now. I just cut that before you arrived. This is the stripping machine, and it has just got a cover over the top so it doesn't throw stuff at us, but there's two feed rollers back to back, and then you put the flax in and it pulls that in, pulls those in, and then once it's holding them, it's quite tight, it goes through, and this big stripping drum here, it's spinning that direction, 2,000 revs a minute, and there's a little gap in behind that and a beater bar. The beater bar's job is to wear, it's a round bar, and flax is very abrasive, it wears all the steel parts out. When flax milling was a big industry, there was 700 flax mills. Your foundries, they had the moulds and they were continually making parts, and you could just ring up and order a whole new feed roller or a stripping drum, all the bearings. You could, it was nowadays, of course, you can't, because this is a museum piece.
So they were building these machines here in New Zealand,
yes,
or importing to Europe?
This was all made in New Zealand. This one here is stamped Christchurch. Other ones are stamped made in Dunedin. And this machine, the government offered a prize in the 1850s. The New Zealand government offered £100 to someone who could invent a mechanical system stripping the flax, because there was a lot of flax exported out of New Zealand that was done like the Maori people by hand, huge amount. So you're trying to develop a new country that's got no roads, no rail lines, no nothing, and pretty inhospitable sort of country in a way, New Zealand, mountainous and lots of problems to getting around New Zealand. So the main way of getting around New Zealand was boating, shipping around the outside. And they had a market for this stuff. Prior to the Europeans even really living in New Zealand, there was 30 tonne of fibre exported prior to 1830. Virtually all stripped by Maori ladies and slaves by hand. Because ropes were terribly important, weren't they? Yes. All your sailing ships, your horse and dray, everything way you moved and carried goods, you had to have ropes. So that's why this was important. And so what's actually happening here is that drum's going around 2,000 revs a minute. These things are holding the flax, and it's getting forced down, and there's a little concave gap between this drum and the beater bar, very fine gap. It would be about 2 to 3 mils, and all I feed of this small stuff. I'm probably going to feed about 3 blades at a time, and it forces all that through, and the vegetation gets stripped off, and mostly just the fibre gets flicked over the chain and goes out the end.
Okay.
So I'm going to run this for you now.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm going to give you EMF to put on, and when I'm running it, you're welcome to have a look around. There's about 3 good places to look. You can see under here, if you get down, you'll be able to see the flax going through and getting put over the chain, and you see a huge amount of vegetation comes off. You'll be able to see me feeding it, and if you move around quietly behind me, you'll see the fibre coming along each feed coming along the chain.
Okay.
And about every 10 or 12 feeds, I'm going to zip along and take that off the chain hanging over the pole. But you're very welcome to move around. Just be careful where you walk and where you put your hands, because everything here is dangerous. Most people that worked in flax mills had short fingers. It was inherently dangerous. Now that's the hair muffs over there.
step.
इसके अंदर भी vegetation.
You want to work in this lab? Join SIT as a tutor and you can also work with it.
How come those fibers are very equal size?
They are. At the bottom, they're all equal.
They are naturally.
Naturally equal.
Yeah, they're all equal. That's pretty well stripped, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's because the feed roller is holding it. The stripping drum's doing its job. But as it gets through to the end, the flax gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And it pulls through those tips.
It's okay.
And the feed rollers don't have enough pressure to hold them. It pulls them right through without stripping them properly.
So what you do? You will cut from here or?
No, that's what you think you'd do, but they didn't. The next machine's called a scutching machine, a cleaning machine.
That will do the rest. Yeah.
Yes, and you've got to dry it first, so. Yeah. I'm slightly underprepared because I haven't actually got enough dry fibre here, but we'll see if it's still raining. Come out here now, and just careful with that step. And I'll show you some flax drying on the fence that I did yesterday, and then just before.
I see you drying, yeah?
Yeah, these are the flax drying fences.
Interesting.
The photograph in the shed back there of all these paddocks here, fences like this, all drying flax. I'll get this in the next day, few days when it dries out. So that's what they're trying to do. They put it over the fence. I'll show you that. So you take, we put a twist in it, we put it over the pole, take the twist out, and you put it over like this, put it over the fence like that so the sun can get through and dry everything out. Yeah. And if you feel those fibres, if you run your finger along, you can actually feel every little notch from that stripping drum whacking off the fibre. Feel those little notches?
Yes.
When the Māori ladies, when they strip muka or by hand, they don't have any of that notching at all. There's this lovely and beautiful and consistent.
Exactly.
So that make it more ropes, more smooth and
Well,
more
yes,
strong?
and they can actually make lovely fine things you wouldn't mind wearing as clothing, frankly, which seems amazing to me. The other part though, if you're making a twine or a rope, that's really handy, because when you put the little twist to make it into a twine, that binds to the next bit of rope. So it actually was handy for you when you wanted to make a rope. Depends what you're using it for.
But this guy is making pipe out of those.
So we make, so we had some yarns, you know, we produce yarn, then we weave it to fabrics, then we laminate it to make composite.
Yeah. So how do you make, well, we'll go to that in a minute, because we'll show you a full beautifully finished bale.
Yes.
Because we would love to be able to make our own yarn here. We never made yarn as a industry. We sent it all up to the big Donaghy's big manufacturing plant, and they made thousands and thousands of tons of twine and rope.
That's correct, yeah.
It was a big industry.
Yes.
Right, we'll go back in. Wooden cotton reels, and bolted on the end is what Dad called a hackle, and it alternated the next time with a bar, and that's, as the fibres held on that chain, these goes through and combs off all the short threads,
it's like
flaxy trips. Yeah, and that would have been lovely and shiny, but this was an old one that got left outside to rust for 40 years. Yeah, the flax would have been wearing the metal quietly all the time, and everything would have been shiny until it wore out to a point you just said, oh, I better order some new ones of those, and you'd unbolt it and bolt new ones on. Everything was designed to be worn out and replaced. Yeah. You probably won't need the ear muffs from now on, because it's actually quite quiet, this next machine. It's got a fan at the back to draw away the dust from the short threads. These are ones I've put through once, but I'm going to put them through again just so you can see. don't really even remember seeing any in the movies, but who knows? Who knows? What was I thinking? Yeah, so we actually don't.
Yes, I read something on the net that they make some carpets or something out of flax fiber, but that's the first time I see it.
Yes,
It's quite cool.
and they also used to use this stuff as well underneath its underlay as well, underfelt, and under the carpet. So it had a multitude of uses, but it was cheap. When they closed the flax mill, they were selling farm. Yeah.
Dairy farming is more profitable than sheep farming.
It sure is. We produce a lot of milk. This farm, I've now got, I got two sons, they got a farm each. One farm would produce enough milk for Invercargill. The other son would produce enough milk for the rest of Southland.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the traditional thing was to grow turnips,